Look, if you're going to get stranded in space, there are definitely worse places than the Galactic Empire's central processing station. Sure, the chairs are designed for beings with 3 spines, and the muzak sounds like dying space whales, but at least the vending machines accept 17 different currencies. 8-year-old Lucy Martinez wasn't particularly concerned about any of this. She was more focused on the fact that her juice box had run out 20 minutes ago, and her parents were still arguing with some very official-looking aliens about engine parts and diplomatic immunity and other boring grown-up stuff. "Sweetie, just sit tight for a few more minutes," her mom had said. That was approximately 400 minutes ago, Lucy had counted. She swung her legs from the oversized waiting room chair and stared at the most interesting thing in the entire cosmic DMV. A shimmering, cube-shaped puzzle sitting on the desk of the alien behind the information counter. The thing was about the size of a basketball and seemed to be made of pure light that shifted through colors Lucy didn't even have names for. The alien himself was far less interesting. Vex looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a very tired middle manager, complete with what appeared to be reading glasses perched on his elongated snout. He'd been hunched over paperwork for the past hour, occasionally glancing at the cube with the expression of someone who'd been personally insulted by geometry. "Excuse me," Lucy said, having finally worked up the courage to approach the desk. "What's that pretty box thing?" Vex looked up with the weary expression of someone who'd answered this question roughly 10,000 times. "That, young human, is the Nexus Cube, an ancient artifact of unfathomable complexity, created by the Zephyrian civilization approximately 50,000 years ago, before they mysteriously vanished from existence." "Cool," Lucy said, pressing her face against the transparent barrier that separated the waiting area from Vex's desk. "What's it do?" "Nothing anymore," Vex sighed dramatically. "It's supposedly a puzzle, though the term is rather inadequate. The cube contains quantum-dimensional mathematical sequences that would require understanding of 17 different types of theoretical physics, 4 extinct languages, and computational abilities that exceed most planetary supercomputers." Lucy nodded seriously, though she'd stopped listening after quantum. "So it's broken?" "Not broken, child. Impossible." Vex adjusted his glasses with one of his forearms while continuing to stamp forms with another. "The legend states that whoever solves the Nexus Cube will be granted one favor by the Galactic Empire itself. Any favor. No restrictions, no limitations, bound by cosmic law and backed by the full power of 1,000 worlds." "That sounds pretty good," Lucy observed. "Indeed it would be, if anyone could actually solve the confounded thing. I've been the Cube's guardian for 847 years, and in that time I've witnessed attempts by the greatest minds in the galaxy. Quantum physicists, reality engineers, beings whose brains exist in 12 dimensions simultaneously, all failures." Lucy studied the cube more carefully. It was definitely pretty, and it seemed to pulse gently, like it was breathing. Sometimes the lights inside would shift and dance, forming patterns that almost made sense before dissolving into chaos again. "Have you tried?" she asked. Vex's laugh was a sound like rustling papers mixed with existential dread. "My dear child, I may be a mere bureaucrat, but I'm not delusional. I possess exactly 0 qualifications in advanced mathematics, reality manipulation, or miracle working. I'm here to file forms and direct traffic, not unravel the mysteries of ancient civilizations." "But you've been staring at it for 800 years. 847 years. And yes, I suppose I have." Vex glanced at the cube with something approaching fondness. "It's rather hypnotic, actually. Sometimes I imagine I can almost see the pattern, the underlying logic that would make it all make sense, but then I remember that I failed basic calculus in school and go back to my paperwork." Lucy giggled. She liked Vex, even if he used a lot of big words. He seemed sad in a funny way, like her uncle who complained about everything but secretly enjoyed complaining. "My mom says sometimes the simplest answer is the right one," Lucy offered. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Vex replied absently, returning to his forms, "though I suspect the Zephyrians weren't particularly interested in simplicity when they created a puzzle designed to stump the entire galaxy for 50 millennia. Lucy pressed her face against the barrier again, watching the lights dance inside the cube. They really were pretty, and honestly, after sitting in this waiting room for what felt like 17 years, she was desperately bored enough to find a glowing math problem entertaining. "Can I try?" she asked. Vex's 4 hands froze mid-stamp. Slowly, very slowly, he raised his elongated head to stare at Lucy through the barrier. His expression was the exact same one her teacher made when someone asked if they could use finger paints during a math test. "I beg your pardon." "Can I try the puzzle?" Lucy repeated, pointing at the cube. "I'm really bored, and it looks fun." "Fun!" Vex set down his stamp with the careful precision of someone trying very hard not to lose their mind. "Child, this is not a toy. This is an artifact of immense cosmic significance. The greatest intellects in galactic history have devoted their entire existences to understanding its mysteries." "Yeah, but can I still try?" For a moment Vex just stared at her. Then he began to laugh, a sound like a rusty gate mixed with despair. "Oh, why not? After 8 centuries of failure, perhaps we need the perspective of someone who doesn't understand why it's impossible." He pressed a button, and the barrier retracted with a soft whoosh. "Very well, young human. Come forth and witness the futility of mortal ambition." Lucy hopped down from her chair and skipped over to Vex's desk, where the Nexus Cube sat in what appeared to be a custom display stand. Up close, it was even more beautiful. The lights inside swirled like liquid starlight, and she could swear she heard a faint humming sound, like her mom's old computer when it was thinking really hard. "Now then," Vex said, settling into full lecture mode, "allow me to explain exactly why this puzzle has remained unsolved for 50,000 years. The cube operates on 17 distinct dimensional frequencies, each corresponding to a different mathematical principle that governs reality itself." Lucy reached toward the cube. "Don't touch it yet," Vex squawked. "First you must understand the underlying quantum mechanics. You see, each facet represents a variable in an equation so complex that it would take most beings several lifetimes just to comprehend the notation." Lucy tilted her head, studying the cube from different angles while Vex continued his explanation. The Zephyrothi, being a race of pure mathematical consciousness, embedded their greatest theorem directly into the physical structure of space-time itself. To solve it, one must simultaneously manipulate gravitational constants, rearrange subatomic particles, and perform calculations that exist in dimensions our minds cannot even perceive. By now, a small crowd of aliens had gathered around the information desk. Word had apparently spread that someone was actually going to attempt the legendary puzzle, and various beings were pulling out recording devices and placing bets. Furthermore, Vex continued, clearly enjoying having an audience for his expertise, the cube responds only to pure intellectual understanding. Brute force approaches have been tried countless times. Random manipulation yields nothing but pretty light shows. Lucy nodded politely, though she'd stopped listening around gravitational constants. She was much more interested in the way the cube seemed to pulse brighter whenever she moved her hands closer to it. The mathematical principles alone would require advanced degrees in quantum physics, reality engineering, temporal mechanics, and at least 6 forms of applied philosophy. The linguistic components demand fluency in ancient Zephyrian, proto-galactic, and the conceptual language of pure mathematics itself. "Uh-huh," Lucy said, reaching out to touch the cube. "Wait," Vex held up all 4 hands dramatically. "Are you even listening? Do you comprehend the sheer impossibility of what you're attempting? This puzzle has defeated minds so vast they could process the computational requirements of entire star systems." Lucy looked up at him with the patient expression that children reserve for adults who are being particularly silly. "But I'm just going to play with it a little bit." And before Vex could launch into another lecture about theoretical physics, Lucy placed her small hands on opposite sides of the cube and gave it a gentle twist. The cube immediately flared with brilliant light, cycling through colors that definitely didn't exist in any normal spectrum. The humming sound grew louder, and several of the watching aliens stumbled backward in alarm. "Oh my," Vex whispered, his lecture forgotten. Lucy giggled and twisted the cube the other way. More lights, more colors, and now the thing was making happy little chiming sounds, like a very pleased computer. "Fascinating," she murmured, treating the ancient artifact of unfathomable cosmic significance exactly like the Rubik's Cube her dad had given her last Christmas. She turned one section, then another, following no discernible pattern except what looked fun. The lights inside the cube began to swirl faster, forming patterns that actually did seem to make sense if you didn't think about them too hard. Lucy hummed along with the chiming sounds, completely absorbed in her new toy. "This is impossible," Vex breathed, his compound eyes fixed on the cube as it grew brighter and brighter. "She's just randomly manipulating the matrix. There's no mathematical reasoning, no theoretical framework, no understanding of the underlying principles." "Maybe that's the point," suggested one of the watching aliens, a blue-skinned being who looked like she might actually know something about physics. "Don't be ridiculous," Vex snapped, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. The Zephyrians were the most logical species in galactic history. They wouldn't create a puzzle that could be solved by luck and childish curiosity. Lucy continued her playful manipulations, completely oblivious to the growing crowd of spectators and the increasingly frantic chiming from the cube. She was having the most fun she'd had all day, which, admittedly, wasn't saying much given that her previous entertainment had consisted of counting ceiling tiles and seeing how long she could hold her breath. The cube pulsed once, twice, and then suddenly blazed with light so bright that half the aliens in the room threw up protective shields. And then, just like that, it went completely silent. Lucy blinked at the cube, which was now glowing with a steady, peaceful light instead of the chaotic swirling patterns it had displayed before. "I think it's happy now," she announced. Vex stared at the cube, then at Lucy, then back at the cube. His 4 hands were shaking slightly. "Did she just—" he began. The cube pulsed once, as if in confirmation. "Oh dear," Vex whispered. For exactly 3 seconds, the central processing station was perfectly quiet. Lucy held the now peacefully glowing cube in her small hands, humming contentedly to herself. The crowd of alien spectators stood frozen, like they'd just witnessed someone casually juggle neutron stars. Then every alarm in the station started screaming at once. "Attention," boomed an automated voice that sounded like it was having a mechanical panic attack. "Nexus cube static change detected. I'm Adam Prosper. All personnel report to stations. Reality breach protected." Protected. Emergency lights began flashing in colors that hurt to look at. The floor vibrated as blast doors slammed shut throughout the station. Somewhere in the distance, something expensive-sounding exploded. "What's happening?" Lucy asked, raising her voice over the cacophony. She had to shout to be heard over the alarms, which were now accompanied by what sounded like galactic elevator music played at triple speed. Vex was staring at his computer screen, watching as thousands of error messages cascaded down in languages he didn't even recognize. "The cube," he said faintly. "It's broadcasting a completion signal across subspace. Every monitoring station in the galaxy just received confirmation that the Nexus cube has been solved." "Cool," Lucy said, holding up the gently glowing artifact. "Do I win something?" Before Vex could answer, the main doors to the waiting area burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. Through the smoke strode Admiral Krax, Supreme Military Commander of the Galactic Empire's Third Fleet, looking like someone had crossed a very angry rhinoceros with a tank that had learned to walk upright. Admiral Krax was the kind of being who made entire planets nervous just by existing in their general direction. He stood 8 feet tall, had skin that looked like it was made of battle-tested armor plating, and possessed what military personnel throughout the galaxy referred to as a voice that could break warp cores at 50 paces. "What," he bellowed, causing several smaller aliens to dive behind furniture, "is going on here?" The crowd of spectators suddenly discovered urgent business elsewhere in the station. Within seconds, only Vex, Lucy, and the increasingly agitated Admiral remained in the waiting area. "Well?" Admiral Krax demanded, his 4 eyes fixing on Vex with the intensity of targeting lasers. "My entire fleet just went to red alert because some ancient puzzle box started broadcasting impossible signals. Half my quantum physicists are having nervous breakdowns, and my reality engineers are demanding hazard pay. Explain." Vex pointed a trembling finger at Lucy, who was still examining the cube with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just completed a particularly good jigsaw puzzle. "The human child," Vex whispered. "She solved it." Admiral Krax's expression went through several stages of disbelief, confusion, and what might have been the beginning of a migraine. "She what?" "The Nexus cube. 50,000 years. Greatest minds in the galaxy. She solved it in approximately 4 minutes. The Admiral's gaze slowly shifted to Lucy, who looked up at him with the fearless curiosity that only 8-year-olds possess when confronted with large, intimidating adults. "Hi," Lucy said cheerfully. "Are you in charge? This is a really pretty puzzle. Want to see?" She held up the cube, which pulsed warmly in response to her touch. The steady light it emitted was actually quite soothing, a gentle golden glow that seemed to make everything around it look more peaceful. Admiral Krax stared at the cube, then at Lucy. Then at the cube again. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. It was possibly the first time in his military career that he'd encountered a problem that couldn't be solved by either shooting it or shouting at it very loudly. "This is—" he began, then stopped. "How did— but that's—" he paused again. "Who are her parents?" "They're over there," Lucy said, pointing toward the diplomatic processing area, where her mom and dad were still arguing with officials about engine repairs. They're being really boring about spaceship parts. As if summoned by the mention of their names, Lucy's parents chose that moment to emerge from their own bureaucratic nightmare. Dr. Elena Martinez, xenobiologist, and Captain Tom Martinez, freight pilot, took one look at the scene, the flashing lights, the massive alien military commander, and their daughter holding what appeared to be a glowing bomb, and immediately went into full parental crisis mode. "Lucy," her mother called out, rushing over. "What did you do?" "I played with the pretty puzzle," Lucy announced proudly. "And I think I won." Her father looked around at the chaos, the alarms, and Admiral Crax's expression of barely contained panic. "Okay," he said slowly. "I'm going to need someone to explain what's happening here before I start making assumptions about galactic incidents and diplomatic immunity. Your daughter," Admiral Crax said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a reasonable volume but still sounded like controlled thunder, "has just accomplished something that was theoretically impossible." "She does that a lot," Lucy's mom said absently, then did a double take. "Wait, what exactly did she accomplish?" Vex stepped forward, still looking like he'd witnessed the fundamental laws of physics filing for bankruptcy. "She solved the Nexus Cube, the legendary artifact of the Zephyrian civilization, the puzzle that has stumped the greatest minds in galactic history for 50 millennia. Lucy's parents looked at their daughter, who was now making the cube change colors by poking it in different spots. "Honey," her father said carefully, "how did you solve an impossible puzzle?" Lucy shrugged. "I just played with it until it looked right. It wasn't that hard. It's like that cube you got me for Christmas, except this one lights up and makes happy sounds." There was a moment of absolute silence, broken only by the gradually quieting alarms and the soft humming of the satisfied Nexus Cube. "Oh," Lucy's mother said faintly. "Oh my." Admiral Crax cleared his throat, a sound like a landslide with military training. "There's something else you should know," he said grimly. "According to ancient galactic law, whoever solves the Nexus Cube is entitled to one favor from the Galactic Empire. Any favor. No restrictions." Lucy perked up immediately. "Really? Anything I want?" "Anything," the Admiral confirmed, looking like he was swallowing something particularly unpleasant. Lucy grinned, her eyes lighting up with the dangerous enthusiasm of a child who'd just been told she could have anything in the candy store. "Cool," she said. "I know exactly what I want." Admiral Crax's expression immediately shifted from barely controlled panic to full-blown existential dread. In his 300 years of military service, he'd faced down space pirates, negotiated with hostile alien empires, and once personally held off an invasion of sentient asteroids with nothing but a plasma rifle and sheer stubbornness. None of that had prepared him for the terrifying unpredictability of an 8-year-old human with unlimited cosmic power at her disposal. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should discuss this with the Imperial Council before any requests are made." "Why?" Lucy asked, tilting her head with innocent curiosity. "Are they busy?" "No, they're, well, yes, but..." Admiral Crax looked like he was trying to solve a math problem while being attacked by wasps. "The thing is, when we say any favor, we mean any favor. You could ask for your own planet, or immortality, or the power to reshape reality itself." Lucy's eyes went wide. "Really? That's so cool. But I already know what I want." "Emergency council session," Admiral Crax barked into his wrist communicator. "Priority Alpha, all senior officials to conference room 1 immediately. We have a situation." Within minutes, the central processing station's main conference room had been transformed into what could only be described as organized chaos. The table, designed to accommodate beings of various sizes and anatomical configurations, was surrounded by the most powerful entities in the known galaxy, all staring at Lucy with expressions ranging from awe to terror. There was Chancellor Wix, a floating jellyfish-like being whose translucent body pulsed with nervous bioluminescence. Minister Quart, who looked like a very official tree that had learned to wear suits. Ambassador Nil, whose crystalline form refracted light into rainbow patterns across the conference room walls. And at least a dozen other high-ranking officials, each representing different aspects of galactic governance. Lucy sat in a chair that was approximately 3 times too big for her, swinging her legs and examining the Nexus Cube, which continued to glow contentedly in her hands. Her parents flanked her on either side, looking like they'd accidentally wandered into a very surreal dream. "So," Chancellor Wix bubbled, her voice carrying the melodic tones of someone trying very hard to remain calm. "You're the young being who solved the impossible puzzle." "Yep," Lucy said cheerfully. It was fun, way better than the waiting room. And you understand, Minister Quart rustled, his branch-like appendages creaking with tension, that according to the ancient compact of galactic law, we are bound to grant you one favor of unlimited scope? Uh-huh. The big angry guy already told me that. Admiral Krax winced at being described as the big angry guy, but decided this wasn't the time to address military protocol with a child who held the fate of the galaxy in her small hands. Ambassador Nil's crystalline form chimed softly as she spoke. Perhaps we could interest you in something reasonable? A nice planet, perhaps. We have several lovely worlds with excellent climates, beautiful scenery, and absolutely no responsibility for governing billions of sentient beings. Or immortality, suggested Chancellor Wicks hopefully. Think of all the interesting things you could see and do across the centuries. No more bedtimes, no more school. Or unlimited wealth, added Minister Quart. Every toy you could ever want, the finest foods from across the galaxy, your own personal space fleet. Lucy listened politely to each suggestion, but shook her head after every offer. No thank you. Those all sound nice, but I already know what I want. The assembled officials exchanged increasingly desperate glances. Admiral Krax leaned forward, his voice dropping to what he hoped was a gentle, non-threatening tone that still somehow sounded like distant thunder. Young Lucy, he said carefully. Before you make your request, perhaps you could help us understand what kind of scale you're thinking about. Are we talking about something for yourself, your family, your planet? Oh, bigger than that, Lucy said casually, making several of the officials visibly flinch. Bigger than your planet? Chancellor Wicks's bioluminescence flickered anxiously. Much bigger. I want it for everyone. A collective shudder ran through the room. Minister Quart's tranches began rustling like he was caught in a hurricane of pure anxiety. Everyone? Ambassador Nil chimed, her crystalline form reflecting the conference room lights in increasingly frantic patterns. Could you perhaps be more specific about the scope of everyone? Everyone everywhere, Lucy clarified helpfully. In the whole galaxy, maybe even the other galaxies too, if you can do that. Lucy's father cleared his throat. Sweetie, maybe you should think about this a little more. These seem like very important people, and they're clearly worried about what you might ask for. But Dad, it's really simple, Lucy said, looking at him with the patient expression children use when explaining obvious things to confused adults. I know exactly what everyone needs. And what, Admiral Krax asked, his voice barely above a whisper, does everyone need? Lucy grinned, completely oblivious to the cosmic-level anxiety she was causing. It's easy, everyone just needs to be nice to each other. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a cork drop. Every official in the room stared at Lucy with expressions that suggested she just announced her intention to rearrange the fundamental constants of physics using finger paints. Nice, Chancellor Wicks repeated slowly, as if testing the word for dangerous properties. You know, Lucy said, starting to get excited about her idea, like, no more being mean or fighting or saying ugly things to people. Everyone should just be nice and friendly and helpful, like how my teacher says we should be at school. That's, Minister Quart began, then stopped. His branches were now rustling so violently he sounded like a forest in a windstorm. That's not how galactic politics works. Why not? Lucy asked with genuine curiosity. The question hung in the air like a cosmic riddle that no one knew how to answer. Several officials opened their mouths to respond, then closed them again, apparently realizing that explaining the necessity of interstellar conflict to an 8-year-old might be more complicated than they'd initially thought. Well, Ambassador Nil chimed uncertainly, there are trade disputes and territorial claims and ideological differences and… But what if everyone was just nice about those things, Lucy interrupted. Like instead of fighting about who gets what, they could just talk about it and share and work it out together. Admiral Krax looked like he was developing a migraine that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Child, you're describing the complete restructuring of galactic civilization as we know it. Is that bad? Lucy asked. It's… He paused, searching for words. It's impossible. So is the puzzle, Lucy pointed out reasonably. But I solved that, and it wasn't even hard. The officials exchanged glances that conveyed entire conversations about cosmic law, binding magical contracts, and the terrifying possibility that they might actually have to implement galactic niceness as official policy. The thing is, Chancellor Wicks bubbled desperately, we're bound by ancient law to grant your request, but something like universal niceness would require magical enforcement across billions of star systems. It would fundamentally alter the behavior patterns of trillions of sentient beings. Cool, Lucy said. So you can do it? We, Admiral Crack started, then stopped. He looked around the table at his fellow officials, all of whom were nodding with the resigned expressions of people who just realized they were about to accidentally create galactic peace, whether they wanted to or not. Yes, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of impending cosmic change. We can do it. Lucy clapped her hands together excitedly. Awesome! When do we start? What happened next would later be described in galactic history books as the Great Niceness Incident of 2387, though most scholars agreed that calling it an incident was like calling the birth of a new universe a minor disturbance in the space-time continuum. The moment Lucy made her official request, the Nexus cube in her hands began to pulse with a rhythm that seemed to match the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. The ancient Zephyrian magic that had been dormant for 50 millennia suddenly awakened, recognizing the completion of its purpose and the binding nature of cosmic law. "Oh no," whispered Chancellor Wicks, her bioluminescent body flickering like a distress beacon. "I can feel it starting." The cube's glow intensified, and suddenly every being in the conference room felt a strange tingling sensation, as if reality itself was being gently adjusted around them. It wasn't painful or frightening exactly. It felt more like the universe was giving everyone a warm cosmic hug and politely suggesting they might want to reconsider being jerks to each other. "This is highly irregular," Admiral Crax began, then stopped mid-sentence as his perpetually gruff expression softened into something that might have been approaching pleasantness. "I mean, this is a fascinating development that we should approach with open minds and cooperative spirits." He blinked in surprise at his own words, then looked around the table at his fellow officials, all of whom were undergoing similar transformations. Minister Court's branches had stopped their anxious rustling and were now swaying gently, as if moved by a peaceful breeze. Ambassador Nil's crystalline form was refracting light into soothing pastels instead of frantic rainbows. "Oh dear," Chancellor Wicks bubbled, though her voice carried none of its previous panic. Instead, she sounded almost cheerful. "I believe the magical enforcement is beginning to take effect across the galaxy." Lucy beamed, completely delighted by the pretty light show the cube was putting on. "It's working! Look how sparkly it is!" The cube wasn't just sparkly, it was broadcasting pure, concentrated niceness across subspace at faster-than-light speeds. On planets throughout the galaxy, beings who had been in the middle of arguments suddenly found themselves apologizing and offering to share snacks. Warships that had been engaged in battle paused mid-combat as their crews experienced sudden, overwhelming urges to complement each other's tactical formations. Lucy's parents watched in fascination as their daughter's innocent request began reshaping galactic civilization in real time. "Honey," her mother said gently, "do you understand what you've just done?" "I made everyone nice," Lucy announced proudly, "just like you and Dad taught me to be." "But sweetie," her father said, though he was smiling despite his obvious concern, "you've changed how billions of people behave. That's a really big thing." "Good things should be big," Lucy said with the unshakable logic of childhood. "If being nice is good, then lots of people being nice is really good." Admiral Crax, who was still adjusting to his newfound tendency toward diplomatic pleasantness, received a priority message on his wrist communicator. He listened for a moment, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and what might have been suppressed amusement. "Chancellor," he said, his voice carrying its usual authority but none of its typical intimidation, "I'm receiving reports from across the Third Fleet. The crew of the battleship Devastator has just sent a formal apology to the pirate fleet they were pursuing, along with an invitation to discuss their grievances over tea. The pirates have accepted and are apparently bringing homemade cookies." Chancellor Wicks's bioluminescence pulsed with what could only be described as cosmic bewilderment. "I'm getting similar reports from the diplomatic corps. The Vorthan Empire and the Crystal Coalition have just called off their 3-century war and are planning a joint cultural festival instead. The Trade Federation has announced they're restructuring all their contracts to ensure fair compensation for everyone involved," added Minister Court, his branches rustling with what sounded suspiciously like approval. "They're also implementing galaxy-wide profit-sharing programs." Ambassador Nil chimed softly, her crystalline form reflecting increasingly cheerful patterns. "The Assassin's Guild has just voted to disband and retrain as a professional complement service. They're apparently very good at finding people's positive qualities." Lucy listened to each report with growing excitement, clapping her hands every time someone mentioned something nice happening. "This is the best. Everyone's being so good." Her enthusiasm was infectious, even among beings who were supposed to be the most serious and responsible entities in the galaxy. Several of the officials found themselves smiling genuinely for the first time in centuries. "There's more," Admiral Krax continued, consulting his communicator with an expression that suggested he was still processing the impossibility of what he was reading. "The Bureaucratic Union has announced they're streamlining all paperwork processes to actually help people instead of confusing them. Processing times for permits and applications have been reduced from months to minutes." "That's wonderful," Lucy's mother exclaimed, then caught herself. "I mean, it's very efficient. The Intergalactic Revenue Service has declared a general amnesty on all tax penalties and is offering free financial counseling to help people manage their resources better," Minister Court added, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "They've also started sending thank you cards with all tax bills." Vex, who had been quietly observing the proceedings from his corner of the room, suddenly perked up. "Oh my! I'm receiving notification that my processing station has just been redesigned for maximum comfort and efficiency. The waiting room now has proper-sized furniture for all species, unlimited refreshments, and entertainment systems. The muzak has been replaced with actual music that people might enjoy." "See," Lucy said triumphantly, "everyone's happier already." Chancellor Wicks was monitoring galactic communications through her bio-neural link, her expression growing more amazed by the minute. "The effects are spreading faster than we calculated. Entire star systems are reporting spontaneous outbreaks of cooperation, kindness, and what appears to be organized group hugging." "Is that bad?" Lucy asked, echoing her earlier question but with even more innocent confidence. Admiral Krax found himself chuckling, a sound that had previously been considered physically impossible by most of his subordinates. "Actually, young Lucy, it appears to be remarkably recovered. Crime rates across the galaxy have dropped to near zero, not because of enforcement but because everyone suddenly prefers being helpful to being harmful. The Economic Council reports that productivity has increased dramatically," Ambassador Nil chimed, "because everyone is working together instead of competing destructively. Resource disputes are being resolved through collaborative sharing programs. And the Galactic Senate has just passed its first unanimous resolution in recorded history," added Minister Court. "They've voted to establish Universal Niceness Day as a permanent holiday." Lucy giggled. "Do I get cake for my holiday?" "I believe," Chancellor Wicks bubbled with something approaching delight, "that everyone gets cake. Lots of cake. The Bakers Guild has just volunteered to provide free celebrations across the galaxy." The Nexus Cube in Lucy's hands pulsed one final time, then settled into a warm, steady glow that seemed to whisper contentment. The magical transformation was complete. Across billions of worlds, trillions of beings were discovering that being nice to each other was not only possible, but actually felt really, really good. "There is one small issue," Admiral Krax mentioned, though his tone suggested he didn't consider it particularly problematic. "Several of our military academies are reporting that their combat training programs have been spontaneously converted into conflict resolution workshops and team-building exercises." "Sounds way better," Lucy said approvingly. "Fighting is dumb, talking is much nicer." "Indeed it is," Admiral Krax agreed, and the fact that the Supreme Military Commander of the Third Fleet had just endorsed peaceful conflict resolution would have caused mass panic among his troops if they hadn't all been too busy helping each other organize community gardens. Lucy looked around the table at all the important alien officials, who were now smiling and chatting pleasantly instead of looking stressed and worried. The conference room felt warm and friendly, like the best kind of family dinner where everyone actually liked each other. "I did good, didn't I?" she asked. "Young Lucy," Chancellor Wicks said, her bioluminescent patterns now pulsing with genuine warmth. "You may have just created the most peaceful era in galactic history." "Cool," Lucy said. "Can we go home now? I want to tell my friends about my space adventure." And that was when every official in the room realized that the 8-year-old who had just restructured the fundamental nature of galactic civilization was still, at heart, just a kid who wanted to share her exciting day with her friends. 3 hours later, the central processing station had been transformed from a soul-crushing bureaucratic nightmare into what could only be described as the galaxy's most efficient customer service experience. The waiting room now featured comfortable seating for beings of all anatomical configurations, a snack bar that somehow knew exactly what everyone wanted to eat, and entertainment systems that played content perfectly tailored to each viewer's preferences without anyone having to ask. Vex, who had spent 847 years dreading his job, was now practically glowing with satisfaction as he efficiently processed paperwork while humming cheerful songs. His new title, as displayed on a freshly updated nameplate, read Director of Galactic Niceness and Puzzle Appreciation. "I have to admit," he said to Lucy as she prepared to leave, "this is considerably more enjoyable than my previous position. Did you know that when people are nice to each other, everything just works better? It's remarkable. Revolutionary, even." "That's what my mom always says," Lucy replied, carefully placing the now dormant Nexus cube in her backpack next to her juice box and a half-eaten sandwich. "Being nice isn't hard, it just makes everyone happy." Through the station's viewing windows, they could see the immediate effects of galactic niceness in action. A fleet of former pirate ships was now working alongside military vessels to establish the galaxy's first interstellar neighborhood watch program. Merchant vessels were sharing navigation data and offering assistance to any ships in distress. Even the notoriously antisocial grump aliens of Sector 7 had started a pen pal program with the perpetually cheerful beings of the Andromeda Cluster. Admiral Krax approached with a formal document that looked far less intimidating than usual, mainly because it was decorated with small, cheerful doodles around the margins. "Young Lucy," he said, his previously thunderous voice now carrying the warm authority of a favorite uncle. "On behalf of the Galactic Empire, I present you with this certificate of cosmic achievement. You are hereby recognized as the official solver of impossible things and the first honorary director of universal niceness." Lucy accepted the certificate with appropriate solemnity, though she was mainly excited about the gold star stickers that had been applied to it. "Thank you. Can I show this to my teacher?" "I believe your teacher will be very impressed," Admiral Krax assured her. "We've also taken the liberty of preparing a small token of appreciation for your remarkable achievement." He gestured to a nearby display case, where the original Nexus Cube stand now held a collection of similar-looking puzzles, though these glowed with softer, more playful colors. "Training cubes," he explained. "We thought you might enjoy teaching other young beings how to solve supposedly impossible problems. Each one contains a different lesson about cooperation, creativity, and thinking outside conventional parameters." Lucy's eyes lit up with genuine delight. "Can I really keep them? These are so pretty." "They're yours," Chancellor Wicks bubbled, her bioluminescent patterns now pulsing in what had become the galactic standard rhythm for contentment. "Consider them educational tools for spreading the art of constructive problem-solving." As Lucy carefully packed the training cubes into her backpack, her parents finally completed their own paperwork, which had been processed with unprecedented speed and efficiency by officials who were now genuinely interested in helping rather than hindering interplanetary travel. "All set," her father announced. "Our ship's been repaired, refueled, and the mechanics even threw in some complimentary upgrades, because they said they enjoyed the work. We also packed us a lunch for the journey home," her mother added, holding up a basket that smelled amazing. Apparently the station's food service wanted to make sure we had a pleasant trip. Lucy looked around the transformed waiting area one more time, taking in the sight of various alien species chatting pleasantly, sharing snacks, and helping each other with their paperwork. A group of young alien children had gathered around one of the training cubes she'd left behind, working together to solve it with the same innocent curiosity she'd shown with the original Nexus cube. "This turned out really nice," she said with satisfaction. "Everyone looks so much happier." "Indeed they do." Minister Court rustled approvingly, his branches swaying in a gentle breeze that seemed to follow him everywhere now. "The Galactic Happiness Index has reached levels we didn't even know were mathematically possible." Ambassador Nil chimed in with musical tones that sounded like wind chimes made of pure joy. "The Cultural Exchange Program has received more applications in the past 3 hours than in the previous 3 centuries. Everyone wants to learn about everyone else's traditions and share their own. And the Complaint Department," Vex added with obvious pride, "has been converted into a compliment department. We're having trouble keeping up with all the positive feedback about governmental services." Lucy giggled. "That sounds like a much better job." As the Martinez family prepared to board their shuttle for the journey home, more and more beings gathered to see off the small human who had accidentally created the most peaceful era in galactic history. There were no speeches or formal ceremonies. Just a lot of friendly waves, genuine smiles, and what appeared to be an impromptu group hug involving several dozen different species. "Come back and visit us sometime," Admiral Krax called out as they walked toward their ship. "The galaxy is always better when you're around." "I will," Lucy promised, waving the certificate of cosmic achievement over her head. "And I'll teach my friends how to solve puzzles too." The shuttle ride home was pleasantly uneventful, with traffic controllers who were genuinely helpful, space lanes that had been voluntarily organized for maximum efficiency, and not a single instance of the cosmic road rage that usually plagued interstellar travel. "So," Lucy's father said as they entered Earth's solar system, "how was your first galactic diplomatic mission?" "It was awesome," Lucy announced, pulling out one of the training cubes and watching it pulse with gentle colors. "I made lots of new friends, solved a really cool puzzle, and helped everyone be nicer to each other." "Is that all?" her mother asked with amusement. "Well," Lucy said thoughtfully, "I also got a certificate and some new toys. Oh, and I think I accidentally made peace happen everywhere." Her parents exchanged glances over her head, the kind of look that parents share when their child has just casually mentioned reshaping the fundamental structure of galactic civilization, like it was a typical Tuesday afternoon activity. "You know, sweetheart," her mother said gently, "most people spend their entire lives trying to make the galaxy a better place." Lucy looked up from her new puzzle cube with the earnest expression of someone who had never doubted that making things better was both possible and necessary. "But Mom," she said, "if everyone just remembers to be nice, it's not really that hard." And as their shuttle touched down at the spaceport on Earth, where the customs officials greeted them with unprecedented friendliness and the baggage handlers were actually smiling, Lucy began planning how to teach her second-grade class about the exciting new art of solving impossible problems. After all, if an 8-year-old could accidentally create galactic peace during a boring layover, imagine what she could accomplish during show and tell. The Nexus Cube, safely tucked away in her backpack next to her homework and a bag of cosmic trail mix, pulsed once, in what might have been agreement, or possibly just contentment, at having finally found someone who understood that sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions. And somewhere, in the depths of space, on a monitoring station that tracked impossible events, an automated system quietly updated its files to note that the Nexus Cube had not only been solved, but that its solver had somehow managed to exceed all expectations of what could be accomplished, with unlimited cosmic power. The file was marked, "Child did good. Recommend keeping an eye on this one. Also, send thank you card to parents for raising such a thoughtful human. The galaxy appreciates their efforts." As in the new age of universal niceness, even cosmic monitoring systems had learned to say please and thank you.